Ancelotti says that against PSG, the midfield that has the highest probability of starting together is Valverde, Cruz, and Modric, which kind of also implies that he's probably going to go with a 4-3-3 again, which probably means Asensio on the right wing. How do you guys see that functioning, and what are the roles that each of these midfield trio would get against PSG, and how would that work best if you're going to field those three together?
What worries me is that last point you made. Carlo's probably going to stay with the 4-3-3, and I just feel like with that midfield, I get concerned with the 4-3-3 just because I don't think we have maybe it's the physicality, the athleticism to just compete with the PSG midfield, and I think we could get ripped through on transition, especially if we are going to press a little bit higher, like Carlo mentioned. And so I would like to see a fourth midfielder, somebody else just to give that extra stability and to provide those extra legs in midfield rather than playing with the 4-3-3. Or if you're going to go 4-3-3, have the wingers be a little bit narrow and have your fullbacks provide the width. And I think that's another point we can talk about later is just fullbacks and what they bring to the table right now, because I haven't really been happy with what I've seen in the last few games. But yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised at all that he said that, even if it is giving away the trade secrets to PSG already. And I kind of expected that to be the midfield, but I just want, I don't know, I just want a little bit more security in there. I don't know how you guys feel.
So when you say that, you mean in like a diamond, or do you mean Fede playing right wing? Because if it's Fede playing right wing, I might agree. I don't know so much about a diamond, especially if we're going to press. It doesn't
have to be a diamond. I want our wingers, or at least one winger, to be able to tuck in and provide, and maybe be a little bit more narrow to provide just that additional support in midfield.
Yeah, in terms of like, I've never loved Fede at right wing. It's always been functional. But I think this is like the type of game where you want to consider it. And he's got enough reps there that he knows how he's supposed to play it in a way that helps the team, which does tend to be much narrower, especially in possession. And that actually aids our rest defense quite a bit. It puts a lot of stress on whoever that right back is going to be to cover that ground, and tends to make things more left side oriented. But I think a lot of the concern is defensive and how we deal with what PSG are doing. I mean, Fede is going to add, like, offensively in terms of positioning, it's different, but what he offers in terms of ball carrying and, you know, some degree of pressure resistance in his own way, that's all very similar. So if that's how we're going to do with it conceptually, that's something that I think should be seriously considered. My only worry is who becomes that other central midfielder that comes inside. The idea was with Camavinga, this is it, right? Like, put him in. This is why we got him. In terms of the immediate term, this is what he can provide. I don't know if I trust him for this game. Like, the minutes he's played, the inconsistency of position that's happened with him, I don't know if we just throw him in there randomly and ask him to play what I'm guessing would be an advanced midfield role, like whether that would be a good idea. I don't know if I trust Bios like at all. Like, what, he's had a couple of good cameos. Are we going to throw him in there? This is the consequence of the rotations, right? It's not necessarily that it would have made us play better in certain games earlier in the season. It's that it's for these moments now. We don't have to ask the question, do I trust Camavinga?
We don't know what their level is at this point.
Right. Like, I just don't know what that's going to be. So the safest bet given this context is the 4-3-3 with Fede and keeping in Modric in there, because Modric has the quality. And so I understand that at this moment in time. But if we take the grander perspective and we look at the entire season, that's where it gets more questionable. We start to be like, we killed some of our options by not experimenting early in the season, which is, I think, been our larger point about the rotation. I think when people are like, defend it, are like, well, he put out the best 11 to win at that moment. And I don't know if I can disagree with you. It's about the long term. It's about for these types of games where it actually affects you, as opposed to, oh, Camavinga would have like completely changed the result, you know, in some random La Liga match, which, although to be fair, he did actually do some of that when he came on as a substitute in those early games and everyone got really excited. But yeah, that's basically my take on it.
I agree that I think if you're going to go with 4-3-3, I actually would rather have Fede Valverde on the right wing as opposed to Asensio, for a couple of reasons. obviously he's not as good of a goal scorer as Asensio is. He's not going to generate his own shot like Asensio will, and you lose that, admittedly. What you do gain is that you actually get a better ball carrier, and you need someone to really help fly that ball in transition, and that was a huge, huge weak point against PSG in the first leg. You also get a much better passer and creator. So while you might lose the shooting aspect, what you might get is actually possibly more creation and better build-up structure. He's also going to provide you with more defense. Yeah, go ahead, Matt. I know you want to jump in.
Well, yeah, just one thing I want to add is I think he would be able to compete better physically with Nuno Mendes too.
Yeah.
Because everybody who went 1v1 with Nuno Mendes just got bodied and got manhandled, and I think Fede would be one to give him a tough time.
Well, that's where I was going with it too. And the physical aspect of it, and just the way we saw Carvajal get absolutely bodied by Mbappe. And I don't know if it's going to be Neymar on that wing instead this time, or it's going to be both, just interchanging and giving us all kinds of headaches. But regardless, we know that Fede is going to help more defensively than Asensio, and just his two-way presence is going to help us a lot. The other thing is that he can also both defend wide, but also defend narrow pretty at a respectable clip. And that helps our entire control and defensive structure. Because you're also, again, like you guys said, that opens up a third midfielder spot. So you actually have a 4 midfielder scheme, but not necessarily a diamond, but one that is flexible and can also provide you with width. So who that third midfielder is, I actually am not too fussed about it. And I know that maybe that sounds weird, but I actually think that whoever it is would help us. I think Isco, I actually kind of trust him in games like this in terms of ball possession and control and creativity.
I completely forgot about Isco.
And his defensive work rate. I trust him in a game like this, even though we haven't seen him much. I also think that Camavinga, and again, this goes back to Om's point, like we don't really know what level they are because they barely play. And when they do play, they're out of rhythm. But Camavinga has had at least one really good performance against PSG from his Ligue 1 days. And we know his physical capability, especially if you put him a little bit higher up the pitch and in midfield, not in an anchor role. So I like the idea of like Modric, Kroos, Valverde on the right wing, plus the third midfielder being either Isco or Camavinga. Ceballos maybe off the bench if you want. I don't know. Asensio off the bench in the second half. I'm okay with that. That's the kind of how I see this playing out. But I doubt it because Ancelotti probably said that's going to be the midfield is going to be a 4-3-3.
Yeah, I think this is just too experimental for that's not, Carlo has not been doing this. Like he tried some weird stuff very early in the season and that was it. Like he was not doing that again. But just to wrap up my thoughts on this train of thinking, maybe the way I'd handle it would be, all right, let's do the 4-3-3, Fede on the right. Let's start Camavinga. If Camavinga is not doing well, try to maintain that scheme if everything is working defensively as you want it with Fede by putting Isco on, right? And not working, I assume, is like Camavinga is just not making it happen on the ball for whatever reason. And if that doesn't work, then just put Asensio on, put Fede back in midfield and concede that, okay, it did work the way I wanted it to, and let's do like the original 4-3-3 plan. That's the way I think makes sense to manage it. And you have like multiple ways of like testing it out and trying to keep that idea alive before going back to the original position. I don't know if that's like too idealistic, whether you're burning too many subs, but I don't know what other options you'd really want to be going for if you wanted to like do other things. That kind of seems to make the most sense to manage the game, but I don't know how you guys see it.
Yeah, I think we do have to there's got to be something different. We can't go in doing the same thing that we did in this first game. And the good thing is that the personnel almost forces us, the suspensions forces us to change things up. And so is Ancelotti actually going to be as kind of creative and maybe drastic as we're drawing up here, or is he just going to kind of conventional 4-3-3? Fede replaces Casemiro, Alaba and Nacho replace Mendy, and same as always. Or are we going to see kind of something new a new trick up his sleeve? But I just don't think so. Knowing what we've seen from Ancelotti, I just think it's going to be traditional 4-3-3.
This next Ancelotti quote is something that we haven't talked about yet, but is a huge theme. And he says that we tried to press high today. and we have time before the second leg to work on the press and the intensity, which I'm not sure what the hell that means, but explain how you can magically turn on a high press in 2 weeks.
It doesn't really work that way. Like that's not from my understanding of watching a lot of coaches coach high pressing systems and how difficult it can be. It doesn't come together that quickly, right? Because it's not just a matter of position yourself here, and go tackle that guy. It's an entire mindset, right? There's this idea of pressing triggers and being attuned to those triggers, pressing triggers being things that people have to recognize in game as a trigger, quite literally, to go press someone, right? And some of it can be by design and quite obvious, right? So the most common pressing trigger in any scheme you'll see all over the world is when they pass to the fullback, then you go close them down, right? You leave that outlet open, and as soon as the pass comes into them, bang, you're away. No question about it. Go with full intensity. Then there are more subtle things, right? When someone receives with their back to goal, right? Or there's a loose touch, players have to be locked in, right? They have to be able to recognize that instantaneously and go press. And those are the types of like small adjustments, recognitions that keep a press intact, that like go outside just the idea of a basic structure and basic positioning, which is important, but it's just the skeleton for how all of it works. And that stuff takes time. It takes time to develop because it is a mentality that you have to develop. And there's a particular way of training it. And if we have a track record of 2/3 of a season of it not working to the point where actually it was only a third of the season and we dropped the press and we're going to magically revive it, I mean, we're tempting fate by thinking that it can just work that way, right? So I didn't see much in that Rayo game that told me that the press had come back. I mean, we got an early turnover, I think, that led to one of the better Asensio chances. And after that, it just felt like we were creating a runway for Rayo transitions. Obviously, you guys will have stuff you want to say about that, but I also want to know why you think Carlo is doing this. Is it just because we have to do something different, or did he like really feel the pressure of like the way people reacted to that PSG game, right? The media was all over him, like, this is not how Real Madrid play. We have to show a better image of ourselves. There was maybe some whispers of like people higher up not really enjoying the way we played. We have to put in a better image at the Bernabeu. In my opinion, I think that has to be a factor because Carlo is a diplomatic guy. He understands the realities of the position, and that's the real reason he's doing this. But yeah, I mean, address that however you want.
I agree. I think sometimes I feel like Carlo's too scared to lose his job. And like sometimes some of the decisions he makes is more cautious in a bid to not lose his job rather than just doing what he thinks is right or doing what he thinks he needs to do to win a game or to be more experimental or whatever it may be. And for I didn't even think our I really don't have that much to note on our press today because I didn't think we really pressed that often. You mentioned that one chance, and that was the one thing that sticks out to me, and I thought that was a good play, and that was something where, yeah, if we can pick and this is something I've been vocal about, is like we can pick and choose our moments. I think will always be times in games and triggers, like you mentioned, where it's the right moment to press, and you got to go, and you got to fully commit. But this team is not going to be a team that presses for 90 minutes, or it can just on a flip of the switch be able to convert into a pressing team. So if he wants to do that, then I think that's just crazy. But I do think against PSG, we'll see a different approach. I don't think we're going to be pressing the entirety of the game. I think it'll be in moments, and I just hope that. Yeah, I mean, I just think that this was something he did feel the pressure from media. He did feel the pressure from above, and I think he is kind of giving into it a little bit.
So, I mean, this is the crazy thing. Ancelotti is saying that we tried to press. You guys didn't see a press. I saw 2 pressing sequences in the first half that I hated. One of them we actually got away with because Rayo just gave the ball away. And the second one was so bad that I can't even explain. So when he says we tried to press, what does that actually mean? When does the decision made collectively that, okay, this is the moment we try? This is like, how does that work? That's not an identity. That's not even something you can decide on the fly. Like, So the one that I noticed was really bad in the first half was a sequence where Modric and Kroos are high up the pitch, but no one was behind them, kind of cover shadowing, and no one is even in place to read the play and intercept the pass if the ball gets behind them. No one's really in position. They're kind of pressing, but they're kind of not. And the ball with two passes ends up just basically on a run behind our defensive line, and Rayo lose it there again. And so I don't know what that means when we try to press and how that's decided. And that's a really dangerous game to play because it's not a switch you can flip. And it was really bad like when we actually tried it. So I don't know what that means. And I think to Om's question also, like, is Carlo kind of reacting? I think he is because like he's also been vocal about, I think it was, I don't know which game it was. It probably coincided to that around the same time where we stopped having an aggressive press and going into a deeper block. And he was saying, like, we agree with Real Madrid whistling us. And this is not the recent one, because he also said this recently, but he said this like a few months ago as well, where he said, we agree with the fans whistling, so Shakhtar, we have to change. Maybe it was Shakhtar, yeah, because I remember talking about it with you, and he was like, we do need to change something. I agree with the Bernabeu. If the fans are not happy, they have to be entertained. So he does seem like he's not, like Zidane wouldn't care. Zidane would tune out all the noise. He doesn't care about that at all, right? But I think Carlo cares. But I think, so back to the discussion against how that would work against PSG, I think the problem, I think nobody would have cared that we played a deeper block against PSG if our counterattacks were efficient, right? If we had like a blitzing counterattack like we did against Bayern Munich, in 2015, nobody would have cared. But we cared because we also weren't getting the ball into PSG's half at all. Whether that was a combination of fatigue and Vinicius being rushed back and Benzema being rushed back, Mendy being rushed back, I don't know. But I think it was a lot of just positional aspects of this game. So if you're going to play deep, do it. But be in position to counter, because you can't counter playing that deep and PSG being as good as they are physically. So I don't know if a high press is the solution, but you got to be in position to counter much better than you were in the first leg.
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? Is like this, we do need to play differently because if we play the exact same way, we're going to lose, right? But that doesn't necessarily have to be with the press, right? Like, I don't think you can use a solution that you don't have, right? Like, that's just being dumb. And I understand, like, obviously we're talking about media noise and all of that, right? Those types of opinions are going to exist. I think we'll see how it actually manifests, because Carlo might say we're going to press, and what he does is a medium block instead. And because people can't really tell the difference, they're like, wow, we went out and pressed. But we'll see we'll see what it's actually like. But I think this instinct to change something is correct, but it's really more about what Kian was talking about, which is we need to get the ball in PSG's half, right? Because what killed us was our inability to beat the pressure versus a side that's been a shit pressing team the entire season. Granted, Pochettino did some very specific things in that game that made their press good. And it's not like, oh, we were like facing something that was clownish. In that game, it was fine. But to me, that being the biggest issue was surprising. I don't think you can play as deep as we did because that makes it more difficult to counterattack. That's something I talked about. But, okay, if you move the line 10 yards higher, right, and engage them at the halfway line and try to contest them there, the issue of still needing to counterattack is the biggest thing, right? And that goes back to things we were talking about, the midfield. That goes back to things Matt was asking about Mendy's performance, who's going to play at left back. To me, that's where this tie or this leg both would be won or lost, and that's where the improvement needs to happen. Not so much, oh, we need to press PSG's goal kicks, go all the way up there, and that's how because we're not going to dominate them like that. This is not the team we are this season.